Hey everybody, here for episode 5 of the Guile treatment. We are joined by the Dean of UFS University himself, Tamren Cardwell.
Yo, what up?
How's it going?
What is up with it?
Not a whole lot.
So today, after we've been doing our series on decks of the past year, we figured we might talk a bit about how you might go about building a deck. Especially for like a newer player, you might have some trouble. I know I had trouble when I was getting in. I'm sure you guys did too. It's a pretty complicated game.
If you look back on UFS University, the Dr. Wiley 1-dot profile I had, ooh, it was rough. Ooh, it was really rough. Jake Johnson gave me some total shit about that.
Did it have damnation in it? It didn't have damnation in it, did it?
No, but it had the finishing shower.
Oh my God.
Just randomly.
Hey, I mean, that could get like really fast, like late or something.
Yeah.
Yeah, you're hoping.
It was
You're
rough.
hoping against hope.
So I guess I'll kick it off. The deck I'm talking about is the Iceman list that I posted up a little while ago. So that was almost a revisit. That was actually, speaking of original decks or whatever, that was one of the first decks that I built when I started playing again, was Iceman on Evil, back when, I don't know, Evil was pretty bad. It's still not great, but for this, I think I wanted to play him on Evil instead of Water. And the reason I did that was because Evil has a lot more foundations and assets where you can just make sort of free checks than the other symbols. And so that was what I sort of honed in on, is that I wanted to try to trigger his R as frequently as possible to draw cards. And one of the reasons that I kind of didn't worry as much about the multiples is just because Prepare to Fight is out now.
Yeah.
And so any sort of strategy you have that's super reliant on multiples is pretty much just playing like roulette, that you're not going to run into like a good deck.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
So that was sort of the main reason that I went down that path. With that in mind, I had to run like some bad, the idea is you have to run bad checks, so I have to run a bunch of 2s.
Mm-hmm.
Now, one of the difficult things, I guess, is a lot of the 2-check attacks for Evil, and I started building this before Platinum had come out.
Mm-hmm.
So there were a lot that were just kind of weird or bad, or were like stuff. What's Bison's thing?
Oh, Nightmare
Chris,
Booster?
Yeah. Chris built something with it. It's terrible.
Oh, dude, it's Keo
So-
2. It's awesome, man.
But the thing about Nightmare Booster is like you build a deck around that. That's
Yeah.
not just something you toss in.
Mm-hmm.
So I needed like these attacks that were more like utility, because I need to run like other bad checks. I can't just run one bad check and then build a deck around it. Like, so you're looking at stuff like Smile and Missile. Obviously Ice Slasher. I mean, Ice Slasher is just sort of an auto include for all of his symbols. It's his card.
Yeah.
And then I ran Hellgate Executioner, which is sort of a weird card, and that was something that just doesn't get run a whole lot, but it was kind of the best sort of utility evil card that had a 2-check. I could have run the Dimitri one.
Darkside Master.
Yeah.
Yeah, it's Darkside Master.
Oh my God.
I was going to call it Bad Ally card.
But again, like the issue with that is,
Isn't most of your stuff ranged anyways?
so yeah, both of the other attacks are ranged. So like, what it's just like it doesn't work with the other stuff that I'm running. So I had those 3. I maxed them all out, and then Time Slow came out before I was gonna possibly play it in Rockford. I was like, well, I'm gonna make some changes and put 4 Time Slow in here because that card's amazing. And so that was able to sort of massage the numbers a bit to like get that in instead of some of the other stuff. Then sort of filling it out, I had to get like momentum a bit, so I had some stuff, some throws, and I had a lot of stuff that was 4 damage because I was going to be running Robot Masters, because again that just makes checks on attacks, possibly like trigger some stuff, draw some cards. And then I guess in sort of terms of second synergy, I ran sort of in the theme of cards that people don't play. I decided to run Versatile Wings, which is actually like a really, really good card for the deck because...
Is that the Morgan one?
Yeah. So it's, while the top card of your discard pile is an attack, it's just a free E. Your attack gets +1 damage or +1 speed. So if I'm making a bunch of checks, even if I'm not checking 2s, if I'm checking like my 3-check attacks, I still have 3 or 4 checks that I can make during a lot of attacks. Mm-hmm. So I can just kind of dig until I hit one and then just put free stats on stuff. And it's playable while committed, which means that it works well with the fact that I'm going to have to be tapping things to pass my checks because I'm checking 2s. So when I need that 5 and I check a 2, some of the first things I'll commit will be like Versatile Wings because it doesn't matter if they're up or not, they're still playable.
Mm-hmm.
That's very cool. That's really, that's intelligent. That's smart. Look at you.
So like from there, I mean, it's kind of just filling in. So I had to run a lot of like low diff stuff. Just a lot of ones.
Did you have to run basic training? Did you run basic training?
I didn't run basic training.
Okay, at least you didn't do that.
I ran, just power struggles.
Oh, sure.
I love basic training.
I mean, like 4 no surprises because I make
more checks,
making the checks,
and you can play and B people.
Well, probably not.
Probably not.
Kids at home, Plan B should never be Plan A.
That's also true.
Plan B should never be Plan A.
Unless you're Garrett Brett, you can do it B1.
I guess.
Yeah, that is true.
And then I ended up like sort of making some other things. So I was running a couple like Power Made Flesh, and that's just something where it's sort of a value card. It's a 0 diff, and it has momentum heat. So the thing is like my deck, it's not going to work the way that a lot of decks are working right now, where they're running off, they're going off on like turn 2, turn 3. Like this requires more setup because I really need to actually get a couple momentum before like I'm really dangerous with like Ice Slashers. So you just kind of need some like tech pieces to just slow people down. I didn't worry too much about my checks just because I was already running so many 2s. I knew I was going to have to build. So running like 4 checks wasn't that big of a deal. So I guess like that's the thing is for me, I want to start with the character and then sort of find the cards that I want to build around to sort of justify running that character. So I know, for instance, I've tried at various times to build like a Lekman. And the question when you were building a Lekman was basically always, is my E that lets me like clear a couple cards and draw some cards worth it when I could just play Felicia?
The answer is no.
The answer is like, I mean, they share 2 symbols. They have like air and chaos. I mean, I guess the other thing is like you don't have to run like kick, punches, slams.
Yeah.
But the value added was not nearly enough.
True.
And so you get that a lot, especially that was one of the reasons that Dimitri got banned. Is we saw these characters coming out like Gabrick, like Zangief. Like, I guess he'd been spoiled before they banned Dimitri.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
And you just looked at all these characters and you said, these share like 2 or 3 symbols. I think, no, what's his name none of them had evil. But most of them shared like 2 symbols, either like Earth Void, Earth Life.
Like T-Hawk?
And, well, right. I mean, he and Gabrick and all had, and Dimitri all had Earth and Life.
Yep.
And you basically just looked at these characters, and especially the 2 of them, they were throw characters.
Yeah.
And you just said,
there's no reason to
possibly convince me to run this character over Dimitri.
Diversity.
And there's nothing. So you kind of have to think about that. I mean, you can kind of like, if it's just sort of like casually for fun, I mean, you can fanboy out. You can just run T-Hawk with all the T-Hawk cards and like have a good time. But I mean, especially if you're building for something like more competitive, I think you need to sort of step back and really look at your deck and kind of evaluate like, is this character even worth running?
Mm-hmm.
And I think that's sort of like the tough thing because there's a lot of characters I like a lot and I just can't run them. So if you will, like that's what you have to find then. You have to find those other cards that sort of like justify it. Some card that person can use as well or better than anybody else. And you have to sort of build on those synergies, figure out how you're going to set them up. I mean, you're not going to always draw them, so you need to kind of have redundancies. And I guess like that's sort of how I go about it. How about you guys?
I have a question for you real quick,
Sure.
Rob.
Yeah, no problem.
When you're building your deck, what classifies as a must-need? I guess you probably already answered that. Like your synergy with your character are your must-need foundations. Now, do your lower tier foundations that may not work as much with your character? Do you try to eliminate as many of those and try to pack in as much synergistic cards on foundations, and then instead of just running filler?
Are you talking about like spams?
Yeah, like filler, like just basically spams, like filler cards.
It depends. It depends on how good they are, basically. I mean, when I ran my Gutsman deck forever, and that actually ran a ton of spams because I ran 3 revokes, and I pretty much always ran at least 16 cards that were like 1 diffs or lower, or if you counted like stuff like Hidden Laughter or Over the Top. I mean, those are basically spams as well. I'm never going to fail a check on those.
Yeah.
So I often had almost like 20 plus, which is not something I think I would ever really set out to do, especially not in a deck that's like 64 cards or whatever that was. But the difference there was like the 1 diffs that I was running are like 8,000 Degrees, Portal Barrier, which is like really great for Gutsman because you make checks and it reduces damage. Immortal Knowledge, Quick and Precise. So those are like really, really good. And it kind of also ended up like building in with the fact that I wanted foundations anyway.
Yeah.
But I would say that typically I try to run as few as possible. I think you almost have to do some test draws. At least that's what I find. I mean, 'cause you don't want to have a hand, especially not if you're going like second to really like need to build. I mean, you don't want to have a hand 3 diff and a bunch of 2 diffs.
Okay.
Like have no 1s, no 0s, where you're basically only going to be guaranteed like 2 without tapping your character.
Yeah.
Do you ever do test draws on Ultra?
Yeah, I find that it's clumpy, so I don't I don't know. Like, I don't totally trust the randomization, honestly.
Yeah.
I mean, I still look at it just to get a sense. This is probably just biased, but like every once in a while you get like a weird hand that has like 3 copies of this and 2 copies of that, and I'm just like,
because it's purely random. It's truly random.
Yeah.
That might be it too. It's just that I almost never get a hand like that from shuffling, just because
you're a dirty cheater.
There you go.
I break up my clumps of cards before I like shuffle it, and then
look at the bottom, look at the top, see what's up.
So with you, so you start with your character, and then you work with attacks that synergize. Then you move to recap. Then you move to foundations, and then you'll go on.
It doesn't even necessarily
do that?
Attacks.
Yeah.
I mean, Iceman was attacks because he had 2 checks, so I had like.
Yeah.
It depends on what the gimmick is, really.
Okay.
You almost need to have like an overarching like plan, if you will. I guess like the first step is just knowing the card pool. I know. I pretty much just like click the symbol that I'm playing them on and just go through everything. And sometimes you'll find stuff and just be like, wow, I didn't even remember that. I think Versatile Wings was like that. Is I came across it and I was like, this playable all committed? Like, this is going in there.
Yeah.
Like, this thing is great. So I guess it's that, and it's just there's a little bit of an art to it, if you will. You have to be okay with just playing a deck and then losing a whole bunch
and then
seeing what you learned and then making some tweaks. I don't think most of us can't just build a deck like out of a trunk 5 minutes before an event and then go top. I mean, there's a couple people that can.
Yeah.
Jake Johnson can do that. Jake Johnson can take and open up any pack of cards and go, this card's great, this card's not, and then just throw 60 pieces of trash together and go win an event. It's stupid.
So Tam, in the same vein of what Rob was talking about, how do you start your deck building process? Why don't you enlighten us a bit, Mr. Dean of UFSU?
You're going to make my head really big. The first thing that you have to have truly is inspiration. If you don't have inspiration for how you want your deck to work, the deck isn't going to. So whenever I first built Cossack, which is the deck that I'm going to be referencing for most of this, I had just come back from 2016 Nats. I went and I was playing DeForester Athena. And
16?
Yeah, it's 2016 Nats. I was playing DeForester Athena about a month before, and they dropped the ban hammer on me, and I went,
Oh, okay.
I have no
I was
idea
like,
how to play
that's
this
definitely
game.
not what you played.
Yeah.
No, it's not. I went playing a sick, amazing Order Nightman deck. It was, wow. Hyperbomb and is a legend. And the only way that deck was even possibly playable was I had a really good randomly like a Kim matchup, but I just don't think that the Kim player knew how to fight me. And it beat the shit out of Natali because Dragon Flare is an extra 8 damage randomly. You could just rip a Dragon Flare out of their momentum and be like, sick. But I went to that event, and the decks that won was a Tengu Dive deck, and I want to say that Swiss Champ was actually Ryu. And I went, wow, if only Ryu could play Tengu Dive, because I have seen the light. He's always checking Artifice Avarice. He's always drawing 1,000 cards with Tengu Dive. How do I take both of these things and put them together? And I was flipping through my book, and I was like, oh, it's Dr. Cossack. There's the answer. He gets to play 8. He gets to play 8 Avarice, and he'd never fail a Tengu Dive ever. It's impossible to fail a Tengu Dive. My turn will never be over. I play Focus Charge on a 3. Probably pass it, and then stack an Avarice, play Dive on a 5, check, draw 2 damage, draw 3. I'm a 5-hander that just got 9 cards in their hand that turn. Nuts, absolutely nuts. Yeah. My first draft had 24 attacks, and we are going man mode, and only 4 of them were 3 checks. We played Tornado Hold, we played Spear, we played the whole ranked package just to go and beat ass, because I was like, I'll never fail a check. If I pass the first one, I never have to worry about it. We calmed down a little bit. But the first thing you have to do is really have inspiration for what you want to do, whether it be the character or the gimmick that you want. Mm-hmm. I constantly describe to my locals as I make TAM-ass decks. They touch a lot of cards, but they don't necessarily kill you. I played Elect Man, and I played things like Valiant Assault, and I kicked my 2 cards, and the last card I played was Dual Blade Rapture, so that I could just ready Elect Man and then do it again, and then hold 18 cards in my hand as I pass my turn. Be like, look at all the things that I have, and then lose. But this was
tapped out past.
Yeah, I tapped out. I was like, look at all these cards. Like same thing with my Death Vegas. I just want to draw a lot of cards. I want to see all those options. So like things like Hyper Bomb, 1,000 Duels. Like these are cards that I find have strength. Mm-hmm. And so that's the gimmick that I want to play when I play the game, and Cossack facilitates that. So having your inspiration, having your gimmick, which in Cossack is Tengu Dive, and then was later changed into Breath of the Jade Dragon whenever that card came out, of just being able to dip 2 things into momentum, reveal Ice Slasher, and give that card multiple 2. That's just how I killed people. Yeah. You had to deal with Dive. If Dive did hit, that means that you weren't going to block the Jade Dragons. So figuring out how you take your inspiration and your gimmick with the best course of action, and throwing it all in a 60-card deck. I very, very, very rarely do I play over 60, just because, like, if I have a gimmick and I want something to work, then I'm going to make it work on game 1. I don't want to have to try and win game 2 and 3. Mm-hmm. I'd rather lose game 2 because you got to go first, and then just win game 3 because my deck's just better.
No, yeah, I understand that.
That's more of the art. Now we could talk about, like, the science of deck building. I always make sure that my block zones matter. I refuse to have, like, more than 10 blocks or 10 non-blocks in my deck. It doesn't matter how strong it is. I'd rather cut, like, when I first saw Assassination Attempt, I thought the card was bad because it didn't have a block. And I was like, man, I cannot see myself playing this card at all, because, like, what happens when I rip into it on a block turn and I have to hold it? Yeah. I'm dead. I'm just going to die. So, like, I always make sure that I have those block zones, and I always make sure that I have something like in Cossack, Heart of the Mountain. I always play those cards at a 3 of tap -2 speed, so that whenever I do my simple math of if I check a 3, what happens, it's just really easy. I'll always play all those cards at a 3 of in any deck, And I don't actually sure that I'd play a 4 of it. Maybe if I need block zones, but like Heart of the Mountain, unpredictable movement, know your objective, anything that says tap for or commit for -2 speed, I have to play 3 of that card in every deck.
Okay.
Especially because it's just spam. But that's just like that's a tanism as opposed to something that like really has to happen.
Because everybody has tendencies when they build decks, whether it be like you with your 3 ofs, or some people will only play 4 ofs of some cards. Some of my local players will always have zeros in their deck, even though they may not do anything. You know, like they're just blank, or they just
like zero diffs.
Zero diffs, yeah, zero diff foundations. Like they'll just play them just to play them. When
are they playing like 2 checks or anything?
No.
They just want that sick build 5 turn 1.
Oh yeah, definitely, yeah. I had a player who was who shall remain nameless, who played Schecter, who played I think he played like 6 zero diffs in his deck. So he could build 5 or 6 on turn 1 and then murder you turn 2.
But I mean, see, like,
but that's a plan.
Has some sense because I mean, that's the thing. It's like in that case, you do need that build. Yeah. Because especially if you want to go in like quickly, I mean, you need the fuel. Yeah. So that makes sense.
Yeah, true.
That zero diff doesn't say nothing. It says destroy for -1 difficulty plus.
That's also true. Like, but sorry to take away from you, Tam. Go ahead and go back.
It is an active conversation, Chris.
Yeah, I understand that.
We're talking to each other.
Yeah, I understand that. Well, how do you? Okay, so you talked about your attack lineup. What about since we talked to Rob about foundations? What about assets and actions? Say like in a 5-hander, do you choose to play 5? Do you actively have actions and assets? Not to give away your Cossack tech, but
I'll show you the whole deck on here. I don't care. I'm gonna go to Vegas and beat ass. It doesn't matter if you know. Pulling a Matthew Piglet like out of decks on Ultra. But so assets are really interesting. Assets, depending on the hand size, I feel like you could possibly scale up. A 5-hander gets 1 max. 6 gets 2 max. 7 gets 3 max, and you better play assets in Splash Woman because that's the only way you get to play cards. But like the biggest thing, unless that's part of your gimmick. So like I instantly broke my rule because of Dr. Wily. I played like 10 assets in that deck, but those weren't actually assets. They were 1 asset and then 9 foundations. Yeah. So like, unless like your gimmick or your inspiration changes how that works, then I think you should keep it there. And I think assets are some of the easiest things to side out, which is another thing that I do whenever I deck build, is I make sure that I have X amount of vague cards to side out for different, more streamlined answers. Like in my sideboard, I always have, depending on the symbols, I always have Oath and Journey West as a 1-of because of the low block, because of the Omni block, because of the Breaker 2. Those are just things that I feel like I don't need 4 of this in my deck. I can widen my branch just a little bit, but I throw it to my side, and I have to make sure that I have room in my main board that things can be taken out. So like assets and actions are like very, very easy to instantly be taken out. I do the same thing in Vega with I only run 2 Prepare to Fight and 2 apples in my Death Vega deck. And I side 1 more of each in my sideboard. If I need to be aggressive, I'll take something out. I'll take out a Prepare to Fight to throw in an apples if I'm just trying to kill you. If I need to not die because we played a 45-minute game 1 and I won, I'll take out an apples and put in Prepare to Fight. So like having flexibility inside of your main board, that's more of an art. But trying to figure out what cards are flexible is your science.
Rob, you got anything to add on that with the assets and actions?
I think those. So actually, there's a lot of times where once I kind of have an idea of what I want the deck to do, I often will start with whatever symbol I'm playing and just go, show me all the assets and actions on this symbol. Because I may end up playing none of them, but it's like the lowest amount of cards. You know, like there aren't that many. There's going to be way more attacks. There's going to be way more foundations. Yep. So like I like to just look at them and get them out of the way. I feel like those are often you have some of the most powerful effects on those cards. So if you can find a way to run them, it's probably good. I mean, because they're really strong effects generally.
Assets are so good you can't commit them to pass checks.
Pretty much. Yeah. I mean, that's how they're designed.
Unless you're Bishamon.
But there definitely is sort of a difficulty because I mean, you'll see people who are like, oh, well, I'm a six-hander and I'm on air, so I'm going to run 4 copies of Templar. And you can sort of get into this trap where you have like 2 in hand, and then you're effectively, and like, unless you're going to review them, you're basically like a 4-hander at that point.
Yeah.
And as long as your opponent isn't attacking you, like, those are just dead cards. Like, you can't do anything with them except sit on them and wait. And like, maybe that will happen. Maybe you'll be able to use them effectively. Depending on like the skill of your opponent, they may just go, you know what, like, this guy is holding on to like 3 or 4 cards in his hand and like isn't reviewing any of them, and I don't see any Templars in his discard pile. Like, he's probably just sitting on Templars. So I'm gonna just keep like getting ready till the point where I think I can get through 2 copies of Templar.
Yeah.
And if they do, then it might not even help you out. I mean, actions I think especially are like that, because with the exception of something like a revoke or a throw it down, you can't do. But even like throw it down, I mean, you have to attack if you're going to use that.
Oh yeah,
play it and then you attack. I mean, revoke, you can just build. That's a great one. That's one that is almost always worth running, because if you have it turn 1, then it's just a foundation. You just play it, build out. But on a later turn, you kind of can sit on it a little bit for like a key enhance. But I feel like that's kind of the exception. I think actions are really tough to run in like a 5-hander, because
totally,
they're just brutal to have. If you draw 2 of them, like, you're screwed.
Yeah.
Like, your turn, you aren't doing anything with that turn for the most part. And then assets, I think I'm with Tam on that, is that they kind of have to force their way in. Some of them, like, you just definitely bring them in. But, it's easy. Like, an asset is something that's really easy to put in, like, 1 copy or maybe 2 copies. And if you see them, great. And if you don't, it's not a big deal. I mean, if you want, like, unless it's something like Guile, I mean, yes, you run 4 Skull Fortress because that's the deck. Like, that's the whole point of running him, is running that card. So that's, again, like, sort of an exception. I honestly like to look at them, just sort of get them out of the way, and then just have them. I mean, when I build a deck, I put like 1x, 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 1x. Like, there's somewhere I'm like, I'm definitely running 4 of this, so 4. And then I like look at it in Ultra, and I'm like, there's like 80 cards in this deck, and they're all 1x. Time to get to cut.
I actually do the opposite on Ultra, where I actually just put 4x on everything, unless it's unique, and then I put it as a 2 of. And then I actually can't like finish decks on Ultra. I have to have the cardboard in front of me. Even if I like cut out a proxy and be like, all right, this is the thing. I have to like look at the numbers and be like, this makes sense to my brain. Just looking at it, a digital map just doesn't do anything for me.
Yeah.
I'm the slowest kid at the university.
I'm the slowest one at the Guile treatment, so it's okay. Like with the deck I'm referencing with Woodman, I would talk about my graduation into the more than 17 attack club. So I've had a problem for a long time where I can't kill people efficiently. It's because I usually run too little attacks, but too many foundations. I'm running like a 66 card deck at 17 attacks.
What are you doing?
Exactly. So, but for some reason, I'm still killing people every now and then, but it's not like, it's usually later game instead of like a mid game where I feel most comfortable. But with the Woodman deck I'm now playing, I went from 18 to a 19th attack now, because I know, it's huge. It's huge. But no, you think about it though, like, but that could really wreck your numbers though when you're looking at a 3-check, and I'm only running like 64 cards. Adding a 19th attack actually can change your numbers a bit. But with Woodman, he cheats, because I have a thing where my inspiration or gimmick is I like to play characters who get stuff for free. Athena was one. Grant Padley technically in my mind is one, because I get to draw free cards and then pitch one and keep one. But Woodman is basically a 7-hander and a 6-hand size body, and so I get free blocks all day or attacks, and I usually look at a character that can net me the most free stuff before I actually move on anywhere else, and then I'll move on to attacks. And then I found that now sculpting the kill condition now, at least in the symbol that I'm playing him in, is good. is a lot harder than it would be like if I was playing like Chaos, where I could just run spear, assassination attempt, stuff like that. So I actually had to think about how I wanted to kill my opponent, and I go more for I'm playing more 5-diff attacks. So hey, look, I can play Fey cards now. I'm running all 5s. But like Cowboy Battery, Sakura's Shinku Hadouken, which that card puts in so much work. It's basically a 6 mid-6, which is it's fantastic. His own Woodman's Leaf Shield is ridiculous. And then I have to figure out, do I want a 4x of Cowboy Battery? Yes. Do I want a 4x of Sakura's Shinku Hadouken? Maybe not. And then I have to figure out all like the 4s and the 3s, and then if I play a SpaghettiOs, I play a 1x SpaghettiOs, and that's an easy throw in at a 1x Spreggio.
Thank you. I was like, I wasn't positive.
But with that, it's like you kind of have to figure out your whole, how am I going to kill someone by X turn? Because you hits a point. I guess if you don't have deadlock effects, it's a lot harder to kill someone past point X, which is the
Totally.
But
The point of them.
Well, at the same time though, like I don't know. I don't think I'm still not at the point I'm gonna like rely on deadlock effects.
Well, no, I'm not saying
Because
I'm
things
relying on
you
it.
can have it just be like, man,
Yeah.
when I go to deadlock,
No,
this is gonna be awesome.
that's what
and
it's
then you
there.
just run into
It's-
somebody
yeah.
who's like, yeah, I build 5 foundations and then just play attacks forever.
Yeah. Well,
And
no, I understand
all
that.
my foundations have like destroy effects, so
Well, no, I'm saying that it's there in case you face like a wall deck, or if it goes late game, it's good to have those effects. But like with having enough cards that give multiple or that turn into extra attacks, or like any way you can draw a card. So I add White House to the deck, so that allows me to draw a card when I use his E, or if I use the form on Team Psycho Soldier, I get a free card out of that because of White House. But I think it kind of depends on your character, but you have to kind of sculpt your kill turn to what your character wants it to be at. And I think Woodman is a mid to late game character because he builds for free, so he wants to play that late game. So having deadlock effects in your deck help him out more than it would like Dr. Wily or whatever, because Wily can just kill you on turn 2 if he gets the correct draw, so it doesn't really matter. So, but that's not. I'll look at my higher difficulty attacks first and then work my way down. What about you guys with like attacks? Do you guys start from the top up, or does it really matter? Go
Do you
ahead.
wanna go first, Rob?
Yeah.
I can.
Okay.
I feel like I kind of go with importance. I mean, I almost never want to run something that's like all a bunch of 5s.
Yeah.
You sort of like that's how you can really get yourself in some position. I mean, all these things are sort of relative,
Mhm.
but I definitely like running a bunch of 4s.
Mhm.
I like to be able to like maybe play a 5, then a 4, and then like another 4 on like a 6, or like have some way to sort of manipulate that. Like when you start going like on a 5, on a 6, on a 7,
Yeah.
I mean, you're just asking to like check that 2 or 3 and then just look at your report and just turn everything sideways.
Yeah.
And you're like, well, hope they don't block this. And then they do, and you just get back swung.
Yep.
So that's sort of something where if you're running all those, it's sort of like you said. I mean, if you're running all those 5s, like Woodman kind of can, because he can sort of like tap that foundation and then use his E and pick it up and like have it like for later. He can sort of like build those extra foundations, because if your opponent actually starts attacking you, he can just go, oh, never mind, I'm going to pick that one back up and block with it.
Yeah.
So he sort of has like that little extra reach that like can let him do that, but you have to sort of base that on the character. I mean, Tam, you played Vega, so like Vega can run a bunch of 5s because oftentimes like you're not really gonna attack that much until you're in desperation anyway, and then everything's a 4. So there's plenty of characters that kind of like cheese that stuff.
Totally.
But I would still say like I don't worry about like the cost as much as the importance.
Mm-hmm.
So like every time I build like a Gutsman deck, I just start with 4 copies of Curse Splat. And then I go, okay, what else is going to this deck?
What else?
Dimension Door Ambush.
Yeah, some of those going.
whenever I make my deck, and this is a recent discovery. We put some grant money into it from the university. All of my decks, like I was looking and I spread out my decks and I was just looking at them because like I had the cardboard fever of like I wanted to touch cardboard. We didn't have Bebop. This is like 3 weeks ago or whatever, and I laid all my attacks out beside themselves for all three of my decks, and I had 4, 4, 4, 3, 3, 2 on all three decks. The fours were things that I wanted to see by turn 2. If I saw one of it, we're golden. So like in Vega, it was 4 Hyper Bomb, 4 Barcelona Attack, 4 Steel Res. And then my threes were things that like kind of sort of mattered, and if I didn't see them, I didn't see them, or they were really good in very specific situations. So I ran 3 Bloody High Claw and 3 Raging Slash, and then the twos were like the cute little gimmicky thing. So I played Egg Drops because it's another good low block. It's a 2-diff in Desperation, and it momentum controls, and randomly the powerful it gets you. So like that's not something I ever want to see turn 2. That's something I want to see way later. Or if it is turn 2, I'll just get rid of it. So depending on the importance of the card, it all works down that way. And then turning around on the attacks, I have to make sure the difficulties are correct. So because, like I said, I have no problem pitching cutting a card like Assassination Attempt if it doesn't fit inside of those 3 numbers of 4, 4, 4, 3, 3, 2. Doesn't have a block. It doesn't fit inside of that because like I'm tonight. At time of recording, I'm making my Fey deck to see if that's actually what I want to take to Vegas. And I'm sitting here and I have to find a 2 of a card. And I'm like, dude, I have no idea. I have no idea what my 2 of is going to be because everything wants to be played at a 4 of. All of it.
Yeah.
So like, and that's even harder because like now I have to really pay attention to the top right corner for my character to do anything.
Yeah.
So like,
very true.
I have to have a lot of different Venn diagrams happening of what does this attack truly do inside of my deck.
Are you the Pepe Silva meme then? You're the Pepe
What?
Silva. You're the Pepe Silva meme from Always Sunny in Philadelphia, where he has like the conspiracy thing.
Yeah, that's really deck building for me, which is why I don't actually build a whole lot of decks.
Yeah.
I actually don't like. I'm not very good at coming up with the idea, but I'm very good at innovating on top of that idea. The
Sure.
only
So
deck,
like you can like really refine something.
yes, the only deck that I feel like I've actually like really crafted and created was that evil Dr. Wily deck. And even then, I saw Skull Fortress 2 and was like, hey, this is the Forester. I know how to play this. I've been playing Vegeta. This is sick. All right, cool.
Yeah.
That's pretty much what it felt like.
And that's all it was supposed to feel like was just I never have any tapped face down foundations ever.
Yeah, at Worlds last year you did that. I had you tapped, and then you debuilt yourself, readying all your foundations on my turn. And I'm just like, well, yeah, this is awesome. You know?
Yeah, but like that gimmick, it wasn't even the best that it could be because Phil Burtz then turned around and was like, hey, here's a way better death version.
Yeah.
And I was like, yeah, but you're not running 4 Gamma Crush, so what's the point?
Now, okay, so now you were talking about the block zones. Okay, I know it's all like meta dependent on block zones for everybody. It all depends on what your locals is like. Is there a giant Tengu Dive scene, which my locals doesn't? I know you guys have Tengu Dive all over the place in Omaha, and Rob doesn't have locals, so he doesn't matter. But when you're preparing for a big event, do you know?
Well, actually, let me
go ahead, Rob.
Before we do that, do you guys sort of have any like rules or guidelines as it relates to like blocks or checks?
I try to go, if I'm playing twos, my 4 checks are single digits of 5 or less. I usually try not to go over like 5 to 6. I think 4 checks are the devil unless the card is like a good and evil or a Destiny's Intertwined where it's a card that can change a game, then it's worth it. If it's just like a 1/4 that says, oh, I check a 5, I get -1 damage to a minimum of 3 with a really crappy low block, it's gone. So, you know, I just... Well, it works in Guts, man. Oh god, Portal Barrier is so bad. I hate it. But I also try to stick if I am playing safety threes, then I can bump that number up more. I have no issue with that. Or if I get like with Woodman with +1 to my check, I don't really care. If I check a 4, it's a 5. I don't give a crap. You know, Tam, you got anything to add?
Whenever I do my block modifier, I actually don't care about that. I strictly care about the zone because I'll have enough foundations and to pass the check as long as I've done enough playtesting to just like really figure out like, okay, if I get stuck with this 3, I have to do math, including a 3. If I get stuck with a 1, I have to do math doing a 1. It just the math changes case by case. So building it doesn't necessarily matter. If I've got nothing but 3s, I might look at it, but a good spattering, except for, and this is back slightly to your point, you always have to make sure you have 3 high blocks because you're going to get dumpstered by freaking Smite just randomly and be like, oh yeah, that's a card.
So you think that, and then they make it low, and you just wear it all.
Yeah, thanks, Rob. Yeah, that happened to me at a locals, man. I was like, yeah, I had that +3 high, and then he sadistic boxered it to a low, and I'm like, well... Yep.
That just means they're a better player than you, and you deserve to lose.
I guess so, man.
There's only so many levels you can go deep.
I guess, dude. Yeah.
But for my 4 checks, whenever I go through and I audit the deck, I have to really make sure that these 4 checks matter, and I actually think that the 4 checks should be able to be taken out. So those are like my initial snap choices to be taken out, because most of the time whenever you make side decks, they're all 4s.
Mm-hmm.
Anytime that I make a side deck, the power card, things like Demanding Submission is never mainboarded, but when that card comes into play and it's needed, it's a 4. So I need to be able to take out a Black Justice to put in a Demanding Submission.
Yeah.
They both serve slightly different things, and which 4 check affects game 1 more. Game 1 4 checks are what are needed when deck building, and then game 2, game 3 4 checks are for sideboards.
Yeah. Like a
there
stop.
Are plenty of cards, like a stop.
Yeah.
If you are finding filler and you have 0 actions in your deck and you're like, you know what, Zoe's messing me up, or you know what, I'm tired of Goro, this just knock it off. That doesn't matter at the time of this video.
Yeah. Yeah.
But
yeah.
just be like, hey, that thing just didn't happen. Please stop. I don't want to deal with that. Stop.
Yeah.
So you could put that 4 check as long as you have the room for it.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, especially when I was playing Life, pretty much exclusively, I almost never ran 4 checks. I think Portal Barrier might have been the only thing that I ran that was a 4 in Gutsman, but that was more a function of the fact that they had insane cards that all had 5s. So, like, you kind of looked at something and you're like, why would I run this when I could just run that checks a 5?
Wow, hidden lap.
Yeah.
Turns out. So, I've more recently, I think, been hanging out with the Calgary guys a little bit too much. I mean, my Vega deck had 21 4 checks. That Iceman deck has 16. And for a long time, I was sort of would target like 10 or less about. I'd like try to keep it like lower. And I think you can go above that if you just kind of have to just like know it and not expect to sort of like check 5s. If you just look at something, you're like, oh, well, I'll just check a 5, and you're like, oh, it's a 4, oh, it's a 2, 3, whatever.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's easy to sort of get in that mentality of just like, oh, I'll just check a foundation and I'll pass this, no problem. And I think that's almost, you can change that around. It's just maybe you have to build one more turn, and that might not be a good place to be depending on how fast this meta is. I've tried to sort of like relax some of those rules, if you will, and see what it like allows me to play. I mean, that's the thing is like there's a lot of 4 checks that are like really good cards.
Mm-hmm.
That's why they're 4s.
That's why, yeah.
And for blocks, I think I want to have at least 1 block on each zone that's like a +1. Not even necessarily like a 4 of, but even just like a 1 of. Like I want to have at least 1 card at each zone that's going to have like a great block, so that I can either just like hold on to it. Like if I know, for instance, if I know that I'm going against like a guy that wants to combo a Tengu dive, maybe I have like that one copy of like Magnet Slam in my deck, and if I see that Magnet Slam, I can just hold it for waiting for like just wait, just like whenever it happens, like I have this +1. Like if you have another one, I might not, but I have at least one. For right now, I mean, right now, Cowboy Battery is so big, you need to be able to block high.
Yeah.
Like you just need high blocks. You need good high blocks. I mean, you really want to try to get some +1s, some +2s. Like you can.
I feel that way about Tengu Dive.
Yeah. I mean, you can neglect the low a little bit. I mean, there's still a possibility you could run into like a Snake Man here or there, or I mean, kind of a
not after time of recording
strategy is lows and throws.
Yeah.
Just because people tend to not run low blocks, but often like as long as you can get like about probably like 10, 12 in like a 60, 65 card deck, that might even be like more than you need.
That doesn't even count if you're running like DR or something, because normally if you can just DR partial block, you're still taking 3 or less.
Because that's the thing is that, obviously most stuff you're going to have are just mids.
Yeah.
And, so you can like partial stuff always. It's just about like, you need to have those good ones so that you can like block the important stuff.
Yeah.
And that's a little bit more gameplay, but I guess that's the other thing in terms of non-blocks. When you have a non-block, be it a foundation, an asset, an attack, whatever it is, that comes down to priority of play, which is how important is this to play it like the turn I draw it. And if it's really important, then it doesn't matter because unless you have like some defensive draw where it ends up in your hand, and then you're like, oh, okay, well, that sucked. Something like when I built the Guile deck, that had a ton of non-blocks. I mean, it was like 4 copies of Clear Cutter, 4 copies of Unspoken Feelings, and I don't even, there was some other stuff too. But I mean, right there, I'm starting with like 8, which a lot of times I try not for non-blocks. It's like I try not to go above like about 10 to 12, and I think I ended up with almost. I feel like it was pushing 20. I think I had, it was like a 66, 67 card deck, and I had like 43 blocks.
I would have scrapped that deck and just moved on.
And I was actually like really, really worried about that. And I talked to some other people, and I was like, guys, like, how feasible is it to like run this deck? I'm like, there's so many non-blocks in this. And really, as it turned out, I mean, there was a ton of those cards that were just cards that this turn I saw them, they wanted to be in play. So it was less of a problem. I mean, you still have you'd still have a hand here and there where you just drew like 3 or 4 of them, and you kind of went, well, I guess I'm going to play these and, maybe hold one to like bluff a little bit that maybe I have better cards in my hand than it looks like I do, and like have a couple other blocks. But I mean, that was one of the other reasons too why I just ran like 4 Prepare to Fight in that deck, because that's a high block, a low block, and a mid block.
Yeah.
So, I could sort of hold those. And I guess that's even going against what I said earlier about like being a 6-hander and running like a ton of actions.
Yeah.
And that was something that in that case, like, it kind of would cover up a other weakness in the deck just because of the other cards I was running.
Oh, shit. You could Prepare to Fight enhance with Guile and then add that card back down.
Mm-hmm.
That's
I did that a
lot. I've only played my Guile decks on Earth with Kokosho. Just been like double flash kick, Kokosho, double flash kick. That's sick. That's so cool.
Do you guys feel that, like, as a new player, when I know we're basically talking 4 new players, do you feel a trap for a new player is that they have like equal block zones? It doesn't. Yes. Their block mods may not be the best, but they're like running 15, 20, 50, whatever. They're all pretty much equal. Do you feel that's a trap for like a new player to do that?
Absolutely. The only block that matters. The only card that I feel in Standard that matters that you have a mid block. There are 2 of them. One of them matters. One of them doesn't. Is Dark Laser and Yoga Inferno. If you have to have a mid block for those, everything else just partial to mids. You can do that with
Well-
every other card in the
Well,
game.
there's 3 actually. Infinite Tech Sphere, you need to have a mid block too, by the way.
Yes, you got me.
You
Yeah.
do.
Yeah.
You need a mid block.
Or Hold Deliverance. And just
Yeah, or
like,
Deliverance.
how
Yeah,
many
there you go.
times in this?
Dude, I played Dave in the UK, and I was playing Gutsman over there, and I just drew up my hand and looked at it, and I was like, that's a lot of highs and lows.
Yeah.
And I just went, guess I'm gonna play 2 and pass, and maybe he won't combo on me, and he totally did. And I was just like, yeah, look, it's pretty fast. Yeah, well, I'm gonna show you these low blocks, and let's go to game 3.
I lost my Prepare to Fight tournament this past weekend against James, who was playing Eva, and he threw the first mid, and I was like, I don't want to take that. That's a lot of damage. It's game 3. It matters. And I'm like, I'll block it and use one on the mid block. And he like looked at me and just laid down Tech Sphere. And I was like, no. That was their card. I held all these mid blocks game 2 because I knew. But as soon as we shoveled up, I was like, infinite what? Back to the point.
Yeah.
I load my deck up with highs and lows. I play probably 24, 25 highs. I'll play like 8 mids and like 10 lows because like highs kill people unless you're Snake Man. And then in Snake Man, you just don't play any. Your foundations don't have any card text when they have lows. You're just like, I'm gonna keep at least 1 mid so that I can partial block the something, and then I keep the rest of my hand lows, and I just build everything that's high. Anything that's high, I just build it. This is playing against Abby Jones, shoutouts, and she just played Snake Man, and we constantly grinded that matchup. And that's the only matchup, that and Dr. Wily 2 Dot are like the only matchup that lows matter, but like randomly you can get touched by a low and just like lose. Somebody's going to throw Hyperbomb at you. You have to have a low for that. The mid block works, but like mids don't actually matter. And a lot of foundations that are good have mids, and I always just play them. Like the reason that they're a mid, the balancing act, is that they're good. They need to be played on the field. I want to play this tap 2 -2 speed, and those normally have mid blocks. Like I want the effects on the field, and I don't care if I take partial damage. Like even in characters like Ben Shoemaker, like he's such a little baby boy. I have no problem just partial blocking everything, even without the gimmick of discard 1, draw 1. I'll just partial block everything. It's DR, but I just used 1 card to reduce your damage by half. Who cares? Mm-hmm. Unless that card's gonna kill me. So like highs, like we look at the meta of what's happening with Flying Spear, which should be banned. I'm saying it right now. That card should go. Fuck that noise.
Cowboy Battery is better than Flying Spear.
Yeah, Cowboy Battery.
I totally agree.
I
totally agree. But Flying Spear is a whole other thing. Flying Spear by itself is crazy. Cowboy Battery is just like the first one's free. It feels bad because it's like, hey, this is only a 3 diff. This is only 3 speed. It's fine. It's 4 speed, but all your other ones get plus.
Yeah.
I sat next to somebody playing Keith Disbro where they went assassination attempt, Flying Spear on turn 2, and they went, oh, you have the high block? Well, it's still 6 high, so I don't know what to tell you. There's no – sorry, man. If that number was still 4, or even – I don't know. We'll talk about Spear later. But, like, I got on a Spear rant. I don't know where I'm at. But highs and lows – because of what the meta defines, like you have to have in my locals, I gotta have them for Leaf Shields. I gotta have them for Cowboy Batteries. I gotta have them for Flying Barcelona, or not Flying Barcelona. Bloody High Claws. I gotta have them for highs attacks. Right now, kill you. Low attacks are cheeky, and mid attacks, unless it's like one of the power 3 that we just mentioned, they don't actually do much. Unless you're like Tomahawk Man randomly, but even then,
you want to partial him. You don't want to only mid block everything. That's like how you get tapped out. Yeah. No, I would agree that maybe especially when you start like if you're like building a start or whatever, there's probably like a lot of like mids even in those. So you're just like, oh, there's a lot of mids and I could block mids. Like high, like right now, especially like high zone, and I think even historically, like. Typically, like, there's just really good high attacks, so you need to deal with them, and then, like, the lows are kind of the mix-up. Yeah. Or if there's something that has, like, a ton of lows, then it's like, you know that there's a deck like that, and then you have to maybe up it a little bit to, maybe instead of running like 10 to 12, you might run like 14 or 15 because there's like a chance that you'll see that deck more frequently. But high zone is the most important, and then mids you're just gonna have because they're on everything. In terms of mids, I think it's more like you want to have probably like 3-4 copies of something that's like a +1 or a +0, and like because those can just block anything. And then you want some lows because there's just like the random hyper bomb, the random napalm bomb, like something like that where you're just like, I don't really want to take like 7 or 8 or whatever. So I'll toss this out. Like, because a lot of times low attacks aren't that fast either because they're low. So they're already like good. So that
if you want to audit your deck, something you can easily do is just play against somebody, throw together Snake Man, and somebody throw together some crazy all high attack deck like Spear, Tengu Dive, something that just goes off on one zone, and you know ahead of time. Like you sit down across the table from Tengu Man, you sit down across the table from Snake Man, and you go, I already know what I have to do blocking wise. I get it. I totally understand what's going on here.
A really good mix-up deck to test against is actually his base. He plays all 3 zones. So you could technically, and he rips cards from your hands. He plays mids, highs, and lows in the deck, and they can all hit for 10 damage or more. So you can actually test your defensive capabilities against a guy who can dump 30 damage on 3 attacks in 1 turn on you if he gets the correct draw, that is. So that's another thing. That could be thrown into the gauntlet for like new player testing if they're going to go to a PTC or whatever. That could be something, but I think base may be on a downward spiral after these Bebop cards come out, so officially, but
30 damage is 30 damage.
I understand that, but
and ripping a card out of your hand, so like you have to hold 4 cards in order to block 3 times.
Yeah, exactly.
Ouch.
But the drawback, just a tangent, but a drawback of base is his symbols don't historically have card draw, so he's draw dependent. So you may get away with only holding 3 cards. But sorry about that random tangent, guys. But but
we call them tangents.
Yeah, tangents. Yeah, random tangents.
So I guess, Chris, before I was talking about the sort of like checks and blocks, so I think you were talking about like preparing for like an event.
Yeah. So like if you're like a new player and you want to go to say to the Rockford or Omaha PTC or to a 1K or whatever. Worlds. I think like the best way for like a player to test is look at the 3 events prior, build top 4 out of each of those events. You may have some overlap, so it's not that big of a deal, and then just run your head into them. Like if you have a deck and you're like, well, I'm going to take this Woodman to Worlds, blah, blah, blah. Well, you're going to try to find what the top 4 or 5 decks are in the format, and you just run it into them. You may not have the same quality of player, because if you're like a fledgling group, you may not have, like Indy, you have a guy like Thomas Gordon going in and running roughshod over them all the time. So, shots fired.
Yeah, not every playgroup has a Thomas.
No, not every playgroup has a Thomas.
Thank God. Oh man.
But you want to be able to see how your deck scales against like the heavy hitters, like the Disbros, the Wileys, even base, or all high deck. You kind of want to be able to see how your blocks line up, how you can kill them properly. But that you can't just sit in front of a computer to crunch numbers. That is something that you have to actually physically do, I believe.
I guess like in that vein, I mean, how do you feel about net decking?
I
don't think there's like a lot of it in this game.
I don't care. Like I basically I saw Phil play Woodman at the Rockford Robot Masters event while you were winning the PTC, and I didn't get the list.
I don't know anything that happened in the Robot Masters event.
Exactly, because you were winning. But I didn't see his deck all, every card for card. I basically kind of just took pieces that I saw and then just extrapolated. Just added, well, I want this. I like these cards. I feel like this card fits my play style. Like he didn't run one with nature. I will run a 1x of it because sometimes that free damage kills people, and it's technically 2 speed. So it's not.
I mean,
you know,
I know like a lot of times when I'm building a character that I haven't built before,
Mhm.
the first thing I do is I'll go on Ultra and I'll click that character and I'll say decks that include this.
Yep.
And I'll just go through and anything that's like legacy or whatever, like I throw those out, but I'll just like start clicking through
but
standard.
you should though, because sometimes people hide cards, legacy cards in their decks.
It depends.
It depends. I
But-
know.
I mean, like the really really good ones probably aren't even public.
Yeah, exactly.
So-
yeah.
But I just like to look at them because even if they're like something where I just look at it and I'm like I'll look at the attack lineup and be like, oh god, like nope. But I'll just look at the foundations or something, and maybe I'll see like one foundation where I'm like, that's a good idea, or I'll see like an asset that's like that's a good idea, or something like that. Where you just see like those little things. I know to go back to the Gutsman deck. When I first built him, I looked at I don't even know whose list it was. I looked at something and I saw High School Crush, and I was like a pretty new player. Like I didn't quite have like the knowledge of the card pool. So I like looked at that and I was like, oh, like what does this card do? And I just read it and I was like, so I can make a check on every single attack, and also it possibly gets me an extra card the turn I play it. I'm like, that's awesome. Like it's like I play a foundation, I will likely get a foundation because my deck is 60-70% foundations. And then I can just start digging for attacks to pick up.
Mm-hmm.
And I was like, that's a great card. Like, I'm definitely going to include this. And that's something where, like, on my own, like, I might not have even known about it. Especially at the time where I was, like, that new. Like, I didn't know what all the cards did.
So I think of fighters.
Well, right. I mean, yeah. But, I mean, someone who comes in now, they might have been like, oh, I played, like, Street Fighter, Bebop's coming out, like a little bit of Blood Omen, but they might go like, "What's this Rise of the Masters card? Like, I've never seen this."
Yeah. Then you show them Capcom Platinum.
But I like to just look at those decks, and even if it's just a waste of time, like I might look at it and just be like, they're eh. But I might look at that and just see something and just be like, man, I don't like this lineup, or I don't like these foundations, and that might just sort of be something where I'm like, well, I was thinking about doing something like this, and maybe I should try like something different.
Mm-hmm.
So
Just
even
deck
if you're
doctoring
not,
it?
yeah, I mean, even if you're not like copying something, even if you just look at some lists, I mean, they can give you some ideas, and you might even see something and go, "This is a really good idea, but not in this character. I'm going to play it in that character."
Mm-hmm.
So I think like even just trolling through Ultra, sometimes you can get, like as Tam sort of said, that inspiration for the deck that you want to build. So I don't think I ever. I'm trying to think now. I don't know if there's any deck that I've built that was something that I just sat down, built it totally from scratch without input. Maybe the Guile deck, but I ran it by some people. I mean, Zoe was something that I kind of worked on, but I mean, I was inspired by Jeremy. I was inspired by like your player Rick. I just think everything that I've done has been right. Like somebody along the way was something like, so that's the other thing too, is like, you can ask people, you can run it by, say like, hey, like, look at this. But if you're asking for help, especially from players that are more experienced than you, I mean, you can't just totally like go, hey, does this look good? And they're like, well, I think you might want to look at this, and just be like, no. Like,
yeah, you gotta accept criticism for sure.
Open to
empty your cup.
some of the criticism.
Yeah, that's I think that's the number one thing I like about this game is that you can talk to the Garrett Bretts, the Tim Keefes of the world, and you can say, hey, I need help, and they're like, well, this may not work, but you could Garrett may stab you in the ribs a bit, but he'll be nice about it. But he'll give you
like, you need more one-ups.
Yes, exactly. That's what he'll say. But he'll give you ideas. He'll be like, well, this may not work in this guy, but it may work over here, and these parts may work over here. Like Phil, When I met Phil Birch, I thought he was an asshole, but as I got to meet him and know him,
I found out that he was an asshole, but an asshole with a heart. Of gold.
Exactly.
Sometimes.
Exactly. He is the best asshole I know. But no, like he may tell you your cards are bad, but he will tell you ways to improve your deck. Like he does it. I think it's all just for show a bit, and then he'll give you the input that you need, after you just get past all that. And there's a lot of people like that. Like I tell my guys, your decks are bad. And then I'll sit down and be like, well, let's break it down and da-da-da-da-da, Like my Trip Pants guy. Like he always runs 4 Ominous Whistle in every fucking deck he plays. I'm like, dude, 2 up. Or just get rid of it.
You can't even play that card. You don't have the symbols.
I know exactly.
What are you doing?
Yeah, I know. But, so I think it, like reaching out, I think for like a giant event like a Worlds or a Nats, especially for like teams, people may keep stuff close to the vest, but like singles, I don't think anyone really cares. People just like, well, here, I got this idea. And I think you have to become prepared with info to give the person that's kind of like deck teching you. Because you can't be like, well, here's the deck. And then they're like, well, what does it do? You need to be able to explain to them, well, it does this, and I'm trying to do this. And then they can take that and process it and then spit it back out at you as helpful info.
I mean, you also have to, like, as a new player, you have to somewhat stand by your convictions.
Mm-hmm.
Like, I think this is good because I'm playing this card. Well, what was the thought inside of your head why are you playing Prepare to Fight inside of Guile? Well, randomly, it saves my life, and I can enhance and blah, blah, blah. Like, you could, like, as long as you come up with that answer, I never want to hear, I don't know, that card's pretty cool. Like, that's not an acceptable answer.
Yeah.
But if you're like, I thoroughly enjoy playing 4 Gamma Crush because I have these cards that make it less difficulty. I build free foundations after readying them back, and Gamma Crush is 9 damage, and people can't handle that. And I look at you and I'll go, your dick's huge, number 1. Number 2, maybe...
You're incredibly good looking. Number 3, this might work.
This might work. But, like, you gave me a reason. I get to now mull that over, and maybe that changes my perception of me as a veteran player who is stuck in my ways of, I have an art and a science to this, and maybe I get a little too dragged in my science to open up to your art.
Mm-hmm.
So, like, it is okay as a new player to have these cool, neat, memey ideas, but just understand that they are memey ideas, and if you're looking for consistency, go to the pros because they know how to massage decks and massage numbers.
Yep.
Yeah, I mean, I had so many people tell me that Dimension Door Ambush was a bad card, and it's not.
No, it's not.
It's not a bad card.
Card's amazing.
I've had people like sort of come around on it and play it in like other decks. I know Kevin's been running it in a couple things after just seeing it like in action. That card is great, and especially now everything's got 2 keywords. I mean, it's not necessarily throw it in anything, but definitely consider it.
After you told me about it at Worlds and I was playing Wily, every time that I've made a Wily deck on Ultra, I've put it in, and it's the first card I've cut. But I've always thought about it because I just look at it and I go, man, I don't want that stuck on top of my deck.
Yeah, that's
man,
so
that
true.
free check's gonna be annoying, and I just get rid of it.
Yeah, I mean, actually, even in that vein, I had it in my Vega deck, and every single time that I looked at the top card with Pull Dimension and just saw it, and I was like, God, I don't want that card. Like, that is not helping me, like, because I was pretty much always in the position where it was just, like, not necessary. And I was like, I can do better. I'll just turn it into another Spider Suplex. That's a good card.
Now,
non-bannable card, bannable card.
Now, back to some more deck building stuff. Do you guys have, like, a suitable range of how big your deck should be for, like, what hand size? So, like, 5-handers, should your deck be 60 cards? 7-handers, could you go to 70 to 80 cards or whatever? I know that the Miles Tyler Terry deck is an exception. We don't talk about that. It's like 120 cards at last time I looked. So, But Tam, you want to start us off with this? So, do you have a set?
Dallas Cardwell exclusively plays 60 and a character. Maximum.
Oh my god.
I've played Whitzel all the way up to Vega. I have not tried Splash Woman because I don't hate myself that much. But I have played at 60 and a character. The only exception I have to that is actually Dr. Cossack, where I think I'm playing 63. But even then, I might cut some things.
Okay.
Before I go to the event, just because I'm playing a little more cards to see more options, to see what I want to streamline.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah, I think if you can't find a swift, concise deck in 60 cards, it's bad. Every time that I saw Miles Tyler play the game, when he had his maximum, at one time it was an 80 card deck.
Yeah, that thing
I
was
was like,
real big.
I was like, what are you doing, dude? He's like, I want to have as many options as possible. And I was like, I think the issue that you have here, because we then turned around right before the last time you got to play it. I think it was Worlds last year, 2016.
Yep.
Or Worlds 2017. I was like, play an Earth deck. Go off the beaten path, play an Earth deck, play Spider Suplex, play Tiger Knee, and make it a real slim deck and really punish them Earth Terry throws and just beat their ass. Like, it's 60 cards. You see every option that you need. If the cards are 4 of, you want to see it on turn 2. And you're playing so many cards that if you played 6 of it, that logic happens. But there's just – maybe I'm not good enough of a player to have like a 90-card deck and go – I know I can foresee into the future that I'm going to need this one random thing. Oh, your deck runs with momentum? I'm going to have this one random card that I'm not magically going to check off the top of my deck in order to beat you in top cuts, and my name's Kevin Broberg. Like, I'm not that good of a player, so I just want to go in and, like, my deck does one thing. If I want to change that one thing, I've got 8 cards in my sideboard that I'm going to mill off on turn 1 anyways. So, like, I don't know. Your deck's supposed to do a thing. If you want it to do something else, then put in different cards. Like, muddying the waters to make it have more options. Yeah. Just, like, decide what your options are and go for it. Just hope your options are better than theirs.
See, my thought on that is it's a little different because, say, with my Woodman deck, I can tutor stuff. I draw so many cards. I don't want to mill myself out. So there's a way that. Oh god, he's been snacking all night. Because like I build one for free, I pick it up, but I also have cards that draw more cards. So I'm able to see more cards than the typical 6-hander. So I may run a 65 card deck or a 66 card deck because I draw so much, and then I can also, and if I check a special foundation that I need, I have alpha mail to bring it in because I guess it's different on a deck by deck basis maybe.
But like, so how many 4-ofs are you running in that deck? And how many of those 4-ofs could be 3-ofs because you could do that? So as opposed to putting in more cards to give you more options, and you see like something's like under your good deck, Hunters Once More, that card should be a 4-of.
It's 4-of.
But maybe something else that you're like, I need to see this card. I need to see this card a lot. It could easily just be a 3-of. Like, this is a bad example because I haven't done it yet. But there are plenty of times that I've thought about taking Artifice Avarice and putting it a 3-of in Caustic. It's completely off-symboled. Seeing that card in my hand at all is atrocious, except for when I have discard options. Mm-hmm. Like, I can't block with that card. That's another non-block in my deck. So, like, maybe I shouldn't have that card because I need to cut it down by one more card. And that's just an obvious answer because I don't want to see it as often. But the deck says, Cossack says, you run that card at a 4-of. You have to. But that's kind of pigeonholing yourself into what's demanded to be a 4-of and what isn't. Looking at the deck and looking at the ratios, looking at all the numbers, taking a step back and looking at the forest instead of the trees will tell you that maybe Avarice doesn't need to be a 4-of. But, when it is a 4-of, it works really well. And that might work for a 3-round locals, but when I'm saying I'm playing 7 rounds at Worlds and I open up to Avarice in my opening turn, shit, dude, I guess I'm just getting rid of this card. It could have been something else. Mm-hmm. In this World's 7-round environment that just saved my life.
To answer your question, I run 4 4-ofs. To answer
4 4-ofs?
Yeah, 4 4-ofs, yeah.
And then everything else is like 3, 2, and a bunch of crazy ones?
Yeah, definitely crazy ones. I subscribed to the Garrett Brett School of Deck Building a long time ago. I love one-ups.
I hate one-ups.
Oh, I love one-ups. That's another thing. Rob, your thoughts on just playing like one-ups foundations as like silver bullet answers or to like tech one-ups. Your thoughts?
I mean, I think it depends on what it is. I mean, I run them. When you see them, that's great. When you don't, kind of doesn't matter.
Mm-hmm.
I think in terms of deck size, I like to try to stay in like 62 to 65. I don't necessarily limit myself to exactly like 59 or 60. Just because a lot of times like you're cutting cards and you just like if you get to your deck and you're just looking at it, you're like, I don't even know what to cut, but I want this card in here. In UFS, like it's kind of okay sometimes to just say, I'll add it. I'm just gonna put one in or put two in, because other games where you really only will draw maybe like one or two cards a turn. In UFS, I mean, you might draw 5, 6, 7 cards a turn. So you get through them so much faster that like sometimes adding that extra card, like that doesn't actually reduce your utility that much. But I don't know. I mean, I don't necessarily like recommend just going out there and being like, I'm going to build an 80 card deck. Like, it's probably not the best idea.
No.
But I mean, I've had decks where, I was running them at like 65, 66, and I went, I'm going to make this 60. And then it just wouldn't feel like it would sort of lose that feeling and I was like, man, like this doesn't feel like it's running like as smoothly. And maybe it just has to do with like ratios, maybe it's like I had to cut like more attacks or more foundations than attacks. And then all of a sudden I'm failing checks. Totally. Or maybe I was like, oh, well, I'm going to like cut this like asset. And now all of a sudden, like I'm not seeing it anymore because instead of running like 3, I'm running 2. And it's just like that much less likely that I find it. And so that's something where I think you want to like strive for it to be smaller. If you find that you're like making it smaller and then when you play it, it doesn't feel quite the same, then maybe you can like, up it back up. But I tend to like keeping just sort of as a rule of thumb, keeping it where you can basically like go. So like I don't think I'd really run a 5-hander and go above like 64-ish, maybe like 65, and then 6-hander is really like the same general range. I mean, you could eke it up close to like 67, 68, but I think that's pushing it. And I mean, a 7-hander, like you can go pretty high just because if you start playing like 4 or 5 cards, you're also checking 4 or 5 cards and you really like churn through it. And a 7-hander, it's way easier to just sit on a card in your hand until it's useful. You can't do that. Like you can do that sort of in a 6-hander, and you really can't do that in a 5-hander. And in some ways, that sort of can be the advantage of playing a 5-hander is all of your thought goes into the deck building. And then when you play it, you draw your hand and you're like, well, I guess that's what I'm doing this turn. Like, I don't really have any. Yeah, it's like I don't have any options. I guess I didn't want to attack this turn, but I guess that's what I'm doing. Hope I check good.
So what you're saying is that your deck lost its loving feelings, so you had to add a couple cards back in because it didn't feel the same.
So, I mean, you want to talk like the deck that was like that was the Vega deck that I played in Rockford. And that thing was 78 or something like that. That deck was huge. And I got it all the way down to like mid to high 60s. And I tried playing it and I was like, this feels awful. And and it was just something, and that's the thing is, I'm not recommending that to anyone. I'm not saying go out, build an 80 card deck, puts like 18 or 19 attacks or whatever I ran. I think I ran 18 attacks in like an 80 card deck, which is not a great. That's where I run in, I think like 15 and a 60 or something.
Yeah.
But that just kind of worked.
you also have to think about like your strategy for building that deck. Whenever I play my Vega deck, my goal is to you go or I go, you go, I poke, you go, I poke, you go, I kill you. That's the whole strategy. I go hyper bomb, you're dead. And that's the goal. In your Vega deck, you look at your 7 cards and go, I'll build 4 of these, pass. Yeah. I'll build another 4, pass. Mm-hmm. Here's another 4 pass. Another 4 pass.
It's like, this attack, I'm blocking with that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Oh, more options? Oh no, you got ahead. Self-destruct. We'll start over. I'll build 4 pass.
But he doesn't start over though. He has a Zoku Prince out, so he's ahead by 5 now.
Start over. But like your mentality when going into the deck is different. And my mentality for playing this game is I'll beat somebody's ass. Whenever I was first learning to play this game, shout outs to Danielle Tyler. When she was teaching me how to play, I was still playing in Grey Wars with lame ass Elect Man. She was like, it's more important to live than to kill your opponent. Living is more important than dying. But more important than killing them. And I was like, fuck that. I'm trying to beat ass. I am going to sling orange cards and kill you. And that's how I'm going to play the game. And the way that I do that is I've got 60 cards, and they all go for my orange card strategy.
But like
that's I think that's the way to say it, is that if you're an aggressive deck, it needs to be 60.
Yeah, exactly.
It needs to like no bigger than like 61, 62. Mm-hmm. Like, because the whole point is you're running value cards. You want to see them as fast as possible. You want to see them before your opponent gets all their like defense up and running. Like, yes, those are decks that you definitely want to be small. And like when you start trying to play something that's like a little more defensive, where maybe you need some of those options, where you start getting into a longer game, and so like in games like decks like that, you might say like, well, I want to see this thing a lot, but if I have like 3 copies of this card, like it's not helping me anymore. And so maybe that's something that you run as a 3 of, so that, you can see a second one, but maybe you don't see a third. And then that like opens up space for you to run like more 1-ofs. And because you might not always see the same one, but like maybe you'll see these ones this game, these ones that game, and they're all good, but you don't need to see 2 of them.
Totally.
But I think that has to do with the deck. So like something that like I would never run like more than 1 of would be like Egotistical, where it's a decent card. I mean, it's a 1/6. It doesn't have a block. But after the first one goes off, the second one's useless.
Yep.
Like there's nothing. Seeing a second one, like it doesn't have a block, and it being in play does nothing for me.
You can tap it to pass checks.
That's true, but that's about it.
That's the PhD working.
Yeah. Yes. Oh, we hit it.
Because like you were saying about the whole living and not killing, that also depends on the deck, because if
that's like Chris's motto.
That's like my motto. Not really, but like I played through the latter half of the Grey Wars, so at that point it was more important to set. Like I'm more of a backswing player. So, and my deck is set up for a backswing. So I want to drag the game out to where I live longer than my opponent, to the point where they tap all their resources to, well, then I can kill them. It's more of a setup game than it is like, well, I'm just playing defensive the entire time. It's more of a setup game than just trying to run my opponent over on turn 3. I think that's what more of what the mid game is now in UFS is. I'm going to set my opponent up to overextend if I can, and then if the cards are correct, I'm going to kill them.
I think that like that's fine and good, but like here's where just like my differing opinion is I constantly want to put pressure on you, and I never want you to feel comfortable. I want you to be shaken in your seat so much. Even in my defensive decks, like the reason I built a good cut man, and I was like, oh my god, this is so boring. You get to do everything that you want because the orange cards that I'm playing don't matter. And I had to go back and relook and be like, man, everything on my turn doesn't matter. I'm trying to do things on their turn, and they just don't care about the things on their turn. It's not any real pressure. So, like, when I look at my Vega deck, the whole hyperbomb, you're dead, those hyperbombs are really scary. those hyper bombs, you're like, I actually have to deal with this because I'm losing a foundation. You're gonna get an extra card to build or whatever, and I'm just gonna get behind. And so it kind of tricks you into wanting to go in a little earlier, and that's when my backswing happens by forcing you to play my game.
Sure.
And you could do that with almost any deck. Vega's really good at it because, like, you know, he's a sexy man. But like every deck, you can, if that's the mentality that you want, just have that magic card up your sleeve like a magician and be like, actually, I'm not dead. And you tried really hard. Your deck did what it wasn't supposed to. But then you get like people like Garrett Brett. You get people like you. You get people who are like, I'm chill. I'm gonna hold my horses. This pressure isn't real. And so, like, I don't know. I feel like beating ass is how you should play this game. Just go in, play 20 orange cards. If you check bad, you check bad. There's always game 2 and 3.
I think that's probably the best place to start. And, you know, you just go in there, and then when, you know, it's like when you lose, you look back and you go, okay, well, why did I lose? Like, what card, you know, could I add that might like pull its weight better? You know, was it just unlucky? And you know, if you talk to somebody after a match, like most of the time they'll talk to you, like, you know, they'll tell you like, oh man, you know, I was really worried about like this that, you know, maybe you did or didn't do. Like, I don't know why you didn't do X, you know, which is maybe something that like you had a reason for, or maybe you just like forgot or like didn't even realize that was like a line. That's the thing is, you know, your deck isn't going to get better if you're not out there playing it, and if you're not losing matches, then it's probably pretty good. And if you are losing matches, then you should be able to find what the weaknesses are. You know, maybe it's something where you're like, man, every time my opponent gets like 2 momentum, like, you know, I'm really in trouble. And then you have to find a way to go, okay, well, you know, if I go against like a Keith Disbro or, you know, like a Faye or a Felicia, like, what am I going to do? Like, what are my options to get rid of their momentum to allow me to continue doing what I'm doing? And then, you know, you might dig, you know, that's something where it might be the sideboard. It might be something that you go, okay, I'm going to take out 2 of these and put in 2 of these. But those are things where you're not going to find the weaknesses of your deck. Sort of like, you know, like Tam said, you're probably not finding the weaknesses just looking at it on paper. You know, you have to get out there and sort of play it and figure out like what it does well, what it doesn't, and then make some tweaks.
All right, so we're coming up like on an hour and a half. So I don't know if you guys want to have any closing thoughts about deck building as a whole, or some tips for like a newer player, or why don't we start with our handsome guest, Tam?
Closing thoughts are find inspiration and then explore every avenue possible. When you look at a character / symbol / gimmick, look at that thing under all 3 or 4 randomly 3 symbols and figure out what's going to work with this gimmick the best. And then build it and keep it built for at least 2 weeks. Go play it at every locals. Go play it at all your casual games. Have your other deck. But if you're trying to make something even competitive, casual, whatever, keep that thing and play against a bunch of different options. And then lastly, don't be quite so results oriented. I've been reminded of this like 4 times whenever Rob's talked of my Nationals run with Vega. I fought against Andrew Alexa. Shoutouts, amazing player. He was fantastic. I won game 1, was hyped as hell. Game 2, he just Vega'd me. And game 3, I built, he built, and then I draw 7 attacks and go, all right, I guess I'm going in against Vega, that thing that I love everybody to do against me. And I just go and everything works out great. We're both completely tapped out, and I have 1 steel res in my hand, and I go, if I check a 5, I win. I did it, and I checked a 4, and I've never been angrier after a game of UFS. I was ready to go home, and when I remake the deck, I'm like, there will be no 4s in this deck. But the card that I checked was Deliverance, and Deliverance said that in my locals play, I didn't die to a Raging Demon every time I fought Ringman. So like like getting UFS is just a thing that happens in the game. Just like in every game, getting mana screwed is a thing that happens in every game.
Yeah.
And you can't take those as law. You can't take those things that happen inside of your testing as, well, that's just a thing that's going to happen every time. Because checking a 4 when I needed a 5, it's just getting UFS. So after you get done building and you're into the testing phase, just really make sure that you're weighing all the options and you got all the strings attached on your whiteboard before you start making any real dramatic cuts.
Rob, your thoughts?
I mean, I'm not too, like, just sort of generally. I think I would just say, like, don't, you definitely don't have to, like, build everything by yourself. I mean, I sort of touched on that earlier, and whether it's just with like whoever you play with, like, locally, whether it's you find somebody on like the forums or on like Facebook, Discord, like, you can post some stuff up and just say like, hey, I'm playing this, like I'm trying to do this and it's not working out, or I feel like I'm missing something. There's a lot of people that, we got some time at work or a lot of time at work, little, depending. So, some of us have more than others. And, they can, like, look something over and, like, you'll get a lot of advice and, it's not all great or it might not be what you want to do with it. But you can definitely find some, like, constructive feedback for sure. I think you just want to really dig into those options. And I guess you just need to find, like, the synergies. The thing about UFS is that you're never... Oh, hey.
What's up, Big Johnson?
Going there, man.
They said hello.
So, even though you're drawing all those cards, I mean, if you have this, like, sick, like, 3 or 4 card combo, it's probably not going to happen very often. You need sort of, like, redundancies, and you need your combos to be simple. You need something where you're like, well, my character works great with this card, or this attack and this attack work really well together, or, this attack works well with, like, these 3 foundations. And if you're counting on, like, a lot of this coming together in order to, like, do what you need to do, then you might need something that's, like, a little more stable, or something that's, like, less complex. I mean, you can have, like, that totally awesome thing where everything comes together and you have, like, an incredible turn, but you need to have, like, the ability to have, like, still good turns that only involve, like, some of those pieces. I would say that's what it is people, when they're building this deck, they imagine this, like, amazing turn where they just had, like, where they had, like, these 3 foundations out and then they drew, like, 5 attacks in hand and they just, like, went in and checked 5s and everything went great.
They did. It's called Wheel and Steel.
Yeah. Yeah. And, like, the reality, though, is more that, you're going to have those turns where you, like, did everything right and all you need to do is draw, like, 3 attacks and you draw all foundations. Or you're going to have that turn where you're, like Tam had, where it's like, hey, like, I'm playing Vega and I drew all attacks. And I think you need to sort of take that into account with the deck building of just looking for, like, the smaller combos and build around those. Like, don't go after that, like, giant complex thing that is, like, really, really unlikely. You need the things that are, like, more solid and more sort of realistic.
So keep it
Text
simple.
Sphere came out, James made a Mega Man 2 dot that did the infinite. And he had to, like, play, because you can't play Text Sphere on whatever symbol. So he had to, like, play card. He has, like, a 6-card combo to hit the infinite. And we were like, get this garbage out of here. And he's like, no, but I can do it. And then Jasco's like, we got you, dude. 2 cards, knock it off.
Yeah. I guess for me, like, just to echo what Rob said about keeping things simple, I think as a newer player, it's always easier to start smaller, then work your way, then branch out. So I guess like kind of like a reverse pyramid. So go like that, you know. Whoop. I think don't be afraid to ask for help, especially like on Facebook. I know like I've reached out to a couple newer players who've posted stuff. You know, I'm usually available all times a day unless I'm going to work the next day. Then I'm asleep by 8, so because I'm old. But but yeah, I would say don't be afraid to try out things. Like I know some players who are like, well, I don't like this symbol, so I'm never going to play it. Why not? Just try it. You may like it. Like I don't know. I've just recently started playing. Like I liked the good symbol, but now that I'm really delving into it, I'm loving it, and I like the intricacies and the pieces that are moving, and so I'm looking forward to maybe like evil or something like that, like a total opposite, because I don't know. I need to play aggro decks because I'm more of a controlling mid gamer player. So maybe I need to adapt the 60 card booty beat decks. So
you gotta beat ass, dude.
you know, so maybe I just do spike 2 and just go 60 cards and just beat ass with that swordfish 2. So because that card's busted. So but anywho, I guess that's all Rob and Tam said stuff pretty eloquently, so I really can't add any more to that because they're both fine-looking gentlemen. So that's all we got for tonight, guys. We're going to do part 2 of episode 4 sometime in the next few days, where we're going to recap the last half of last year's PTC's Nat stuff. Other than that, so Tam, thanks for joining us. Appreciate it.
Thank you for having me. It was an absolute blast to sit down in Big Johnson's basement and ignore him and record a podcast with you. It was probably the highlight of my night, to be honest.
Oh wow, that's pretty interesting. Rob, thanks as always. Thanks for. I know you got an early day tomorrow going to Virginia, so we'll let you go. So
all right,
everyone, have a good night.
Stay learned.
Then learn, do all that fun stuff.